The Glade with her net is a pretty iconic lord for Wood Elves in Total War Warhammer 2. Her male counterpart, though, should not be overlooked, has at times been a very powerful force for Wood Elves, as people have kind of realized. With this Helm of Discord item, he is a force to be reckoned with here. We've got Rubber Duck of War with a nice Wood Elf Vanguard already fighting the Warriors of Chaos here. So yeah, Glade Lord up in the air on the Dragon. We've got a few Stag Knights, two Stag Knights mixed with the Wild Hunters of Kronos Regiment renowned Wild Riders, a bunch of Deepwood Scouts as well, a Branch Wraith, and some supporting spears up against this massive Chaos Horde. Archaon the Everchosen, a whole bunch of Marauders and Marauder Great Weapons, Marauder Horsemen, backbone of some Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons. Yeah, fun stuff, a lot of Hounds as well. Nice hit and run charge in and out, but Helm of Discord is a very powerful item. Getting back to this, essentially it's an area of effect enfeebling foe for 25 seconds. That standard 24-24 attack and defense debuff as the dragon gets a nice terror charge in here to rout off some of these Warhounds. Stag Knights are taking quite a bit of damage from the Marauder Horsemen and Marauder Infantry, but as the Hounds get routed away, the Spearmen can come in here and get some support. The Deepwood Scouts, Swift Shiver Shards, even one of them, will unload more damage with that double shot, so those Marauder Great Weapons are in for a pretty rough time there, countering the kind of Wood Elf Cavalry, their physical resistance with that Flaming Sword of Ruin, fire damage, and magic damage, both from Kindle Flame. They'll both circumvent the physical resistance with the magic damage, and of course give extra fire damage with Kindle Flame. Anyway, didn't end up helping all that much, as the Wood Elves can just maneuver out of that area of effect, and the Wild Hunters, again, taking quite a bit of damage, but they're still alright. Blade Lord, more importantly, is still completely healthy, quite a bit of ammunition left, although he is a melee powerhouse. He does have the standard ranged attacks. The melee and ranged stats are actually exactly the same between the two Blade Lords. They basically just have a different kit, if I remember correctly. We'll have to double check that, but in addition to the Helm of Discord, he's also got this little AoE banner. He has plus 5 melee attack and plus 8% charge bonus is quite nice for all this shock cavalry. You can see these Stag Knights up to 81, and yeah, 67 to 72 if they've got the extra little frenzy there for the Wild Hunters of Kronos. So pretty good stuff, not to mention, of course, this as well, Call of the Woods giving plus 5 melee attack, so plus 10 melee attack in an AoE is pretty decent. I mean, Wood Elves already, as Elves, have pretty decent attack and defense stats for the most part. Some of the units not so much, like the Forest Spirits, Treemen and Treekin tend to have relatively low melee attack, but nice piercing bolts of burning going to be dropped on those Swift Shiver Shards. The regular Deepwood Scouts just taking a ton of damage there, but with this charge onto the Branch Wraith, Archaon's overextended himself pretty severely, and the Glade Lord can now charge in on his Glade Dragon. Antlers at the ready. Here comes that Helm of Discord. He'd actually been saving it. You know, maybe Rubber Duck of War could have used it a little bit earlier on to support the cavalry there in that initial engagement, but now saving it. You can see Archaon still 54-36, which is quite high in terms of stats, but I mean, it's certainly lower than he would be otherwise, and, you know, the 58-40 of the Glade Lord suddenly seems a little bit more manageable in sustained combat. That extra charge bonus and everything, Archaon juicing himself with Flaming Sword of Ruin, give him the fire damage. He already has magic damage, so it's not like helps all that much, but at the end of the day, he just gets absolutely wrecked by this dragon. Supporting Stag Knight charge as well. And if we take an overarching look here, that is going to put a pretty significant dent in the balance of power. Relatively quick battle. I mean, two very aggressive armies just charging into each other, so we would expect the battle to be pretty quick, regardless of who won. But from the Chaos player's perspective, if you're worried about armored units, like pretty much the only armored units that Wood Elves can bring are armored large units, so it would make more sense to me to bring the halberds potentially, right, over the Great Weapons, and even then I think you would maybe only want 2 of them. Would have probably come in pretty good handy here against the Stag Knights and the Wild Hunters. The Great Weapons are just a little bit of an odd pick for me. I mean, both the Marauder Great Weapons and the Warriors of Great Weapons. The Shields obviously would seem to be on paper a much better option given Wood Elves' ranged firepower, but definitely they have a lot of melee punch now as well, especially with the Stag Knights and so forth. Yeah, some of the halberds might not have been a bad idea either. Halberds, especially with Flaming Sword of Ruin, will deal with the tree units very, very quickly, so maybe you take a couple of the Marauder Great Weapons just to kind of pressure flanks or whatever. just to help pad out a little bit more numbers as well, but I probably would have optioned in a little bit more chaos, regular chaos, halberds or shields, one of the two, depends on how I was feeling. But at this point, just tidying up a few things here. One last Helm of Discord charge, relatively short cooldown as well on Helm of Discord. There's a few characters who have this item, but it is super strong, given that melee attack and defense are very important in this game. Just for those of you guys who don't know, you may be new to my channel, basically it's like your chance to hit or chance to be hit, right? So the higher your attack is over your opponent's defense, then you have a greater chance to actually hit, and if there is an attack roll that can fail, if it does fail, you do 0 damage. So that's why having high melee defense is so powerful in melee combat. Anyway, yeah. Both value from support and from damage, just the Glade Lord carrying a pretty heavy load there. I mean, he's relatively expensive, but Archaon definitely getting shut down pretty hard. Nice to see. Yeah, the rest of the Elven army, I mean, these Deepwood Scouts definitely generated some nice value. We're able to stay mostly protected. Stag Knights and Wild Hunters Corners kind of paid a little bit of a heavy price, but they did allow these Deepwood Scouts to operate freely. So that's pretty nice. Archaon himself getting some pretty good value. The Marauders, the Shielded Marauders especially, really nice value here. The Great Weapons, I mean, they do trade reasonably cost effectively, don't get me wrong, but just like a lot of unshielded stuff to be getting shot. I don't know, maybe you do take 3 or 4 of the Great Weapons still, but just these guys I would trade out for the Halberds or Shields, or maybe even go with more mobility, maybe take a couple of Manticores. Literally the same cost as these Warriors with Great Weapons, which is kind of crazy to think about, but anyway, Marauder Horsemen also just getting kind of crumped in that initial engagement there. Yeah, a little bit rough for them, and the Hounds, just that heavy shock and terror of the Wood Elves. The power they can bring on the charge is quite powerful. They're a very strong counter-charging faction. And in those Wood Elf melee rush builds, definitely the Glade Lord, melee Glade Lord, is an excellent option. So look here. I mean, you've got Orion, of course. Orion's decent for supporting the melee rush as well, but it's more of a kind of different way of doing things. Not so much of a sustained combat role as more of a charge-oriented role, obviously, with the charge bonus buff. He himself is also a pretty good combatant. But the male Glade Lord has a little bit of a sort of difference. They both have a decent missile attack. I mean, the Glade Lord is obviously not as good on paper, but he does have access to dragon breath attacks and can also fly around and shoot, which, you know, Orion has to be on the ground, can potentially get tied down by different things. Yeah, his support buffs as well. I mean, he has these two that are constant, right, in an AoE, which is arguably a little bit better. If we kind of compare cost for cost here, I want to say that they're pretty... I mean, Orion's probably a little bit cheaper depending on the kit you take him in. Yeah, even fully kitted out, he's going to be less expensive than what I would probably take on the Glade Lord here. I mean, you could go full in on his kit. Almost 3,000, almost, yeah, 2,866 points, which is a lot to pay for a Lord that doesn't have that much HP and no self-healing. Like, you know, total HP is lower, plus no survivability, you know, bonuses like Orion has with Cloak of Isha and everything. Of course, you can heal him with other things, but then that requires you investing with magic into it. Branch Wraith can be a decent option. I mean, he does have this Call of the Woods as well, so you can sometimes cut that if you don't need it. But just a little bit of Earth Bloods. Earth Bloods, though, is not going to sustain if you take, like, a lot of shock damage, so you do have to be pretty careful in a build like this not to get crumped, you know, and take too much counter damage. But yeah, just supporting those melee engagements. I know... Like, Wildwood Rangers is another unit. Their melee defense is relatively low for their cost. You can come in and debuff your opponent's melee attack with that Helm of Discord, and of course, you know, you also juice up their attack stats as well, so they get more hits. And they're kind of a good unit to support with this as well. Even like Dryad rushes, helping Dryads like clear a line of chaff or something. You definitely want to be using this against more elite targets if you can, but, you know, in a pinch, they're trading into, I don't know, like Orc Boys or another infantry unit that's maybe not super cost effective as a trade, then you can help turn that around. But again, mostly you want to be using it to support those elite fights. I think the only other Lord I can think of off the top of my head that has this is actually the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, which is another thing, again, that makes him a super strong character, despite the fact that he's Lord of Vampires caster and, you know, all that other shenanigans. Just a super strong item to have. And, I mean, vampires have no choice but to fight in melee, so arguably even better for them. But certainly a nice option for the Wood Elves, and especially given their new kind of tools. Zotes are another one. If you're fighting, say, Bretonia, a little bit risky. You could get torn out of the sky, but most people are going to go with the Fanchantress in this matchup. I mean, granted, both of these guys do magic damage, so you want to find something else to kill the Fanchantress, like maybe just bring some Stag Knights or something as well. But yeah, the Zotes against the Bretonian Knights will be very good, obviously. And their stats are not amazing, so supporting them with that Helm of Discord can be pretty powerful. Of course, you don't have to take him on the Dragon. You can always take him on the Great Stag as well. Another excellent option. The Eagle's kind of a meme. It's okay. I mean, it's kind of here. The Elven Steed's not bad if you want to be a little bit cheaper, but honestly, I would go, excuse me, Great Stag or Forest Dragon for this guy. And yeah, that's kind of my essay on that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.